it says, and now it says we're on air. So this is Matt Stevens in Al Ain, UAE, United Arab Emirates. Today is the 30th of August, 2015, and this is a Learning Together event. I don't know how many. One of these days I'll start keeping account, as we were just mentioning. It's at 200 and something, I'm not sure. And we have with us tonight Bron Stuckey, which she goes by Bron. And she has been for a long time involved in Quest Atlantis. We have the owner of Quest Atlantis here, one of the owners, Nick Knoll, and he's going to tell us a bit. Sorry, he's the owner of Active Worlds. I'm confounding Quest Atlantis and Active Worlds because there is a relationship that will be explained. And we also have Ellen Jameson. She's associated with Reboot Quest Atlantis, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. And we have Dan Bassel with us. He was here a moment ago. He is probably in the stream. But anyway, he might be back in the hangout. Dan Bassel is sort of mentors the Tutor Mentor project in Chicago. So anyway, Bron, how are you tonight? And maybe you could start us off.
Thanks, Vance. I'm really well this early morning here in Sydney, Australia, which will give you a little hint to the global reach of Quest Atlantis. What we plan to do is that I'm going to very briefly tell people a little bit about the history of the Quest Atlantis program and what has brought us to this point today, and then hand over to Rick and Ellen, who will be telling you more about the reboot and how people listening into this broadcast can get involved. So I'm just going to bring up my slides just as a little trigger for me, and I'm hoping you'll be able to read these as they come up, enough anyway to follow along. So Quest Atlantis in its original form is somewhat approaching 10, 11, 12 years old, depending on when people jump in to join it. It was a virtual world game built on the Active Worlds platform and was variously funded over that period of time by the Gates Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, and the National Science Foundation. So it's had some serious curriculum funding in the development of the game and the platform, and was used in countries all over the world. So from Croatia to New Zealand, and from Turkey to Hawaii, and in most states of the United States. It was used in curriculum programs in language, in special education, in science, in math, in digital citizenship, and various other programs. Because it is a multiplayer virtual world, children were able to be in there and associating with kids all over the world. So unlike perhaps Second Life, which is a platform again for virtual worlds, Quest Atlantis actually had a game infrastructure. So children could level up on their curriculum learning. And it had a teacher toolkit which enabled teachers to be involved in tracking their children, but also scaffolding and supporting them as they went through the different missions they were working on. The interface of Quest Atlantis looked somewhat like this for a number of years, and it was actually the brainchild of Professor Sasha Barab, who was then at Indiana University, and wanting to bring a kind of learning, as he put it, where kids could learn to be beautiful all over the world, learn to associate with each other, learn to care about the world, learn to care about the environment, learn to care about knowledge and learning. And so you can see in the screenshot characters, avatars in there. There was a chat so that children could associate with each other. There wasn't any voice. And you can see on the right-hand side of the screen the profile. So I was amassing different things. This was by way my virtual portfolio of activity in the world. So it's a huge system with a lot of background happening in it. And it was designed off a point at which we can bring together entertainment, education, and social commitment into what Professor Barrett called the socially responsible game. And that's fairly important because the game motivation that we know many of us, not just children, enjoy was leveraged in the Quest Atlantis space, but not sacrificing its educational value and its relationship to the curriculum, and then underpinned by a very strong set of social commitments that encourage children to learn to engage in very positive ways with each other, with their knowledge, and with the world. So this is a fairly important set of principles that I know when Rick speaks in a minute about the reboot will be still underpinning where we go. So what I'm describing here are probably the tenets of Quest Atlantis as it was, and as I understand it, the tenets that will be carried through as we move forward. To give you a look at one of the worlds, two of the worlds in, for instance, Ingolstadt, which was the world where children explored persuasive writing, was based on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and the children came in having to solve a mystery, find out about what the mysterious Dr. Frank was doing, and persuade people in the town to take a course of action in one direction or another as a journalist on the local newspaper. So the students were actually acting in the role of a journalist and taking on the practices of a journalist to be able to write, to gather evidence, to gather the truth, and then to write persuasively to encourage people. Their decisions at the end of the game had consequences, and if people were encouraged to follow them, then the game actually changed depending on how the course of action you had taken or the way you had persuaded the townspeople. So there's a consequence at the end that children are addressing for their action. But through their study, they're learning that knowledge has power. Understanding how to construct a persuasive argument was going to be the thing you would level up on in playing this game. One of the other worlds was Taiga, which is a water quality science world. And in this world, children were taking on the practices of a scientist. So they were looking at chemical testing in a river to determine the causes of pollution and fish dying in a particular park. And there were different stakeholders in the park that they had to understand, gain evidence from, and look at the relationships people had to the environment. So again, in this case, the students would be taking a course of action, making a decision, creating a catchment management plan that all the stakeholders could agree to. So it's a very moderated process. Children have to learn not just the environmental issues, but the socio-environmental issues that surrounded this park and the people who had a vested interest in it, from the native peoples to the loggers, and how the park had to be able to balance the needs of everyone and maintain its environmental integrity. And so again, the children would make a choice, and at the end, the world would be changed because of their decision in the game. So in this point, you're leveling up by producing a catchment management plan that becomes to the betterment of the park. Okay, so that's two of the healthy units that were in the program. And I was involved over many, many years bringing and training teachers all around the world in using Quest Atlantis and in becoming a community of teachers. And also in running what we call the Student Congress, which was a world owned, managed and run by students, in which the students created the missions and quests and designed and built the world. And this is long before our darling friend Minecraft came along, and we saw the power of children being able to design and associate with each other, to collaborate and to invest in each other's learning. So That's been a pretty powerful set of things, and a quick snapshot of where Quest Atlantis came from. What interested all those thousands of teachers in Quest Atlantis? Well, initially they were looking for spaces that would be safe and engaging for their students. They knew they wanted to be working in inquiry-based learning, but weren't quite sure where to go. So the curriculum basis of Quest Atlantis was something teachers were very keen to leverage. The interactive nature of the virtual world was very exciting to them. And I have data that shows this is not just all the young teachers or the beginning teachers who invested in this program. In fact, the age group that was most heavily invested across the world was in the 35 to 50 age group. So mature practitioners in teaching got very excited about bringing their children into these worlds. It was motivating students through gameful engagement. And innovating, gave them a new way to look at the world, to study real-world and authentic issues, but in a virtual space. So they could do the water quality science testing that might motivate them to want to go out and do that in the real world, in their physical world, in the local environment, and understand the water quality issues that were happening in their own area. They were networking across the world, and so students built very fond relationships with other kids that they may never physically meet, but they had associated with, they'd met online. We have projects where the kids collaborated from one country to another, Australia to America, Australia to Singapore, and so on, where the children learned a lot about each other's worlds and what it was like to be a 10-year-old in Japan or a 10-year-old in Montana. So there was a lot of association for kids in there with each other and learning about the world, making the world a smaller place and taking down the walls of the classroom. So there were enhanced learning experiences for the kids and the teachers, and that's the exciting part of this, is there was a full agenda there for the teachers to take on board. And as I said, authentic learning and teaching contexts were abounding, and especially in the Student Congress where kids themselves were driving the learning. And that's a fairly important point to just thank Professor Sasha Barab and the original design team at Indiana University, of which Ellen, who we'll be chatting in a minute, was one. And the project then moved from its home in Indiana to Arizona State University, and at that point the funding, the grant funding for this project ceased, and it takes a substantial amount of money to keep something like this, which up until this point, because it was grant funded, was able to be offered free to schools all over the world. So at that point, the funding ended, and the program still lives on, but it's going to be in a new form, in a new envisioned form, and leverage the greater capacity of active worlds as the software exists today. And I think that's a pretty good point for me to hand over to Rick to tell us about, that's where Quest Atlantis has come from. Rick, tell us more about where it's going.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bron. So, can you all hear me? I'm not sure if I'm muted or unmuted.
Yeah.
We can. You did a really good job.
I'm a professional at this. You'd think I'd been around.
I mute people just to keep background noise down, and some people learn to mute themselves and then unmute themselves quickly. You're a pro, Rick. You just went right into it. You're cool.
That's why I said thanks before, because you had muted me. I appreciated that. So, my name is Rick Knoll, and I founded Active Worlds back in 1994, where a friend of mine had programmed the first virtual world, and we called it Alpha World, and I was part of the design team that was working on the various models and the pieces, the kind of building block pieces that you would have in a virtual world like that. we became very popular, and to the point where our largest world, the Alpha World, grew to the size of, roughly the size of California. It was about 412 billion square meters large, so it was huge. And you could have thousands, even up to tens of thousands of people on simultaneously. And this was all before computers had graphic cards or RAM, a lot of RAM, anything like that. So we really started streamlining the software with the idea of, we really thought that the use for this software was going to be educational. In fact, our first contract was with the National Park Service. We built out a chunk of Yellowstone Park to be able to show inner city kids what Yellowstone Park was all about. Unfortunately, no one realized at that time that school systems didn't have, in the inner city, didn't have internet connection or computers that could easily run this. So that's where we started. And through the years, we've had quite a large support group base of teachers who've been using ActiveWorlds for any number of different projects. We opened up a universe specifically for teachers. It was called the Eduverse, and we had thousands of teachers over the years come through and develop their own worlds, their own curriculum. Chris Deedy came through a little bit before Quest Atlantis, and with a project called River City, and he asked us to build in a somewhat of a game structure to it so that kids could go through and learn scientific method by, traveling back in time, finding out a source of the disease that was affecting the area, and then come up with a solution. And they were able to build that solution out at the end of the game and see if that solved the problems. So we really loved that project. Then Sasha came around with the idea of Quest Atlantis, and we were very, very happy that he selected us to use as the platform that he would build on. And through the years, we were able to build in many features for Sasha specifically, so that Quest Atlantis could allow the kids to do just the things Bron was just talking about, that whole learning through consequences. That was such a key idea, and yet so difficult to actually make work in many games, many platforms. They just don't have the layers that what we were able to bring to the table. And really, with the users like Sasha and the other teachers who were contributing, the design team like Ellen, the others that were working with this, they brought their own ideas to the table, and the platform grew now to the point where you have Quest Atlantis as it stands. Over the years, Sasha, he had the research grants and was able to, I think over 100,000 kids went through. They did over 300,000 quests, and that's pretty amazing. It's all documented in their chat logs. There was so much going on, and I never really had a part in it as anything more than the technology end that would be kind of facilitating really what the dream was behind the whole project. When we found out that Quest Atlantis was really, the lights were going to get shut off because the research had ended, and Sasha's team, who had been working voluntarily, I think to a large extent the last year, was unable to continue that at ASU. I decided to call. I just thought that was too. We had several teachers who were still very interested, and they were asking. They'd call me up. What are we going to do? And so I called Indiana University and asked them if it would be possible for us to take it over, to continue on the project for the teachers using it, and hopefully be able to expand it. And we're very grateful that they were able to allow us to do that. The problem is we don't have the grants, and we don't have the large pockets that could fund this all on our own. We have been working as a team voluntarily for about 1.5 years now. We started off with a game called Rhino, and you might have played that in, I'm not sure what it was called in Quest Atlantis. We've always called it Rhino here. But we found that there were some holes in the game logic, and we started just unraveling things, and we got to the point, okay, now we redid all the artwork, we rebuilt the server platform behind it, and now we have this great game, Rhino, that kids can go through. But once you've taken it out of Quest Atlantis, it has nowhere near the value that it had in Quest Atlantis. So our goal really is to take the existing structure of Quest Atlantis. All the lights are on now. We've made sure everything is secure. We've already upgraded to the latest platform, and there's a Mac version that's available now. We've made substantial improvements to the technology side. The game Rhino is available. The quests that were available previously in Quest Atlantis are all there. And it's really our goal to hopefully be able to attract a group of teachers who view this kind of technology as inspirational to their students. People that want to, I think what was Sasha said, that to teach them how to be beautiful, or to learn how to be beautiful people. That idea really comes across when you play any of the quests, and it's our goal to fill Quest Atlantis with more of those quests that are actually developed by the teachers, not by me. I'm not a curriculum developer. I can assist with the technology and the art part, but the curriculum needs to be done by dedicated people who have inspiring ideas already and just want to bring them to life. So that's where we're at. We have a great tool system. Adam has built up an interface that would allow even a student to develop their own games. Not a teacher could, but they could also allow their student to build their own code, their own game or quest inside of Quest Atlantis. And we think that's very, very powerful, possibly even more powerful than just being able to build a 3D version of what they envision and then interact with that somewhat. Now they would have a full game. And we're already there. We're pretty much ready to launch that. It's already in testing, and I think the teachers, I think you'll like it when you see it. The real idea, though, is to have those individuals with their ideas who can now put together kind of a toolbox full of these lesson plans. Now they can share them with anyone. And that's really our goal. Keep Quest Atlantis going and make sure it's accessible to everyone. There, I talked a lot. What else? What can I answer any questions? Maybe Ellen would. Maybe. I'm sorry. Now I can't hear Bron.
I'll ask a question though.
Yeah.
In terms of where this is going, Rick, what other kinds of tools will this interface with? So before we went live, you were talking about a few other things. So where will people be able to play rebooted Quest Atlantis, and what tools will they be able to use it with? Okay,
so first of all, technology-wise, we already have a Mac port that's available. So that's good because it's no longer contained in the same kind of structure as it was before, which was relatively hard to support. So it's a lot more stable and fully developed. We have, behind the scenes, we've built out these, we call them the student sandbox, and that student sandbox would allow what I just described, someone to come in with a curriculum. If they put together a cast of characters that are going to play this game out, and then they take advantage of one of the, the object sets that already exists and has been professionally done, they'll be able to build a game through that with the same structure that you're already used to when you play one of the quests. Ellen has used that far more than I have, and she would probably be able to give a much better description of what it does. I've used it on a surface level, and I feel it's pretty impressive because it allowed me to very quickly go in and script some various game elements. What do you think about that, Ellen? She's muted.
Yes, thanks, Rick. So Yeah, I have that page up here in a moment. I want to sort of preface this by saying that Adam Ingram Goebel, who just finished his dissertation recently, did a lot of work to make these authoring tools much more accessible to students and teachers. So what I'm going to show you is not necessarily the form that we would show to students, but it's a good example of the tool set that would be available for authoring. Just a moment. And Rick, while I'm doing that, I wonder if you could post a link to the Kickstarter page in the chat, because I'm starting to see some very good questions coming through that we have answers to.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we've also been joined by Nellie Deutsch, who's in the Chatween chat. And Nellie, you're welcome to join us here in the Hangout. There are 5 people here, so there's room for plenty more. And if you're having any trouble screen sharing, Ellen, just ask for help. We'll give you a hand.
Okay. I think it might be active now.
Yep.
Yes, there it is. Okay. So this is. Oops. Sorry. I said it. Go. Okay. So this is an example of what someone might see using the basic authoring tools. Ignore some of the other things up here. They would be seeing the designer interface. So what Adam did that was wonderful was he took the vast array of different components that we had been using that were layered on over years of designing things that, oops, sorry. My connection is very slow because I also have Quest Atlantis running in the background, and I think I was being a little ambitious with Google Hangouts. But, oh, now I've made it go completely. So he simplified a lot of the things that we had been using, and he designed a series of activities that students could use to teach themselves to use the authoring tools in much less time than it took all of us to learn how to use them as researchers. And at the same time, he added in a lot of functionality that is basic to many activities that teachers seek out for computational thinking. Oh, it's just going to be too slow. Okay, so I will show the more complicated version of that page instead, maybe. Sorry, I'm also doing this from a slow connection at my house. Not very helpful. So all right. So he had students work with basically, the dialogue system in the game, which was of primary interest to them because they had already been able to do activities where they went through games that included a lot of character dialogue, and they had a lot of ideas for sharing that dialogue with other students. And so part of the motivation for them using some of the basic programming tools in the authoring system was that they would be able to create experiences for other students. And this experiment worked very well, but it was at the end of life of the project, so it wasn't able to be scaled up beyond Adam's dissertation research. I wish that I could show you an example, but I think
I have Ellen.
Yeah, it's taking. We're just seeing blank. It's not loading in the screen.
I have some links to the videos to the 7 videos on how that works that shows the interface.
Really wonderful. Post those links.
Yeah, post those in the chat wing.
Okay.
So I think that's the part that QA had always had the capacity to build well-designed missions, and I think the world according to Minecraft leads us now to a space where kids have to be designers as well, not just consumers of learning content. And so that's what this new capacity is going to allow people, teachers and students, to do. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, that's exactly the idea.
So the other thing you mentioned before the chat, Rick, was that this may be useful to use with Oculus Rift, with other kinds of tools and augmented reality and virtual reality tools.
Yeah. So one of the things that we always get questions: does it work on my iPad? Does it work on my Chromebook? Does it work on my phone? Now, if you have a Windows 10 device or a Windows tablet, yes, it does. But for iPads or Droids, that's not the case. So we have partnered with a company in Seattle that is working right now on a prototype of basically a port of the 3D portion of a world into a platform that will allow you, basically using Unity, to build out a world that is a duplicate of whatever you have for your Windows or your Mac machine. So we're pretty excited with that. They've made quite a bit of progress, and if we're 100% successful, you'll be able to use Quest Atlantis on your iPad. You would also be able to use it on your Oculus Rift if you have one. But just the availability to go onto any one of these mobile devices, I think, is really key to. You just see that schools are moving more and more in that direction. There is a convergence at this point where, obviously, if you have a Windows 10 phone, you can do anything you can with your PC. How long before that's adapted as an entire standard, I couldn't guess. But I do know that if we are successful with our Unity version, you'll now be able to have these multi-user experiences. Kids will be able to build in worlds on an iPad, which would be great. We're very excited about that.
That's mind-blowing, Rick. And we had a question I noticed in the chat. We've had a few. One was, is this only going to be available K-12? So, for instance, could a university pick it up to use for their pre-service education? Could someone doing language learning pick it up for students outside that the school-based age range? Is it going to be broadly available? And the second question from Nellie is, how do we get involved?
Okay, all right.
I have an answer to the first question, if I could jump in.
I would love that. Thank you.
Okay. So I recently met with a professor in Ireland who was they didn't have access to Quest Atlantis, so they actually ended up building something that I thought was remarkable for the similarity in some of the features that they incorporated, and they were inspired by Quest Atlantis. And they just did an entire year of elementary level language learning using this platform, and it worked very well. In fact, a lot of their anecdotes were similar to things that I remember happening with Quest Atlantis. And they also do projects in higher education. So after talking to her, I actually ended up signing up to study with her, and I'm going to be possibly using the Quest Atlantis platform in higher education in a pilot study coming up in the following couple of years. And there is no reason that it wouldn't be available for that. There is not currently content targeted to those age groups, but because we have the ability to create different universes for different age groups, we can safely segment populations so that we can host all the way from K through higher ed and adult learners with no trouble or conflict. So the only issue is going to be, will there be suitable content and who's going to create that?
Well, that's one thing we always have with Quest Atlantis. We had the capacity to put a wrapper around different communities so that they were private or public as they needed to be. And we also provided learning for people in homeschool contexts. We did have a pre-service teacher visibility so that pre-service teachers around the world could associate with each other. And I think, Vance and other people here work in the older age for workplace learning. And I can't see any reason, if it's open to develop your own content, that groups interested in virtual world learning couldn't also be investing. But Rick, tell us more about how people get involved.
Well, we would love to have people go to our Kickstarter, first of all. That pretty much outlines what is available currently and also how someone could get involved. We have had to obviously set some pricing. We did have some input from teachers and from our experience over the years of what teachers think these kind of worlds are worth. Really right now, though, we're looking for not just money, because frankly we can keep the lights going. The lights can stay on and we can keep things running. What a program like this really needs is the support. We need people who will support it, possibly even a consortium of individuals who will help us to solve some of the issues we might have, because we won't have, if we're successful, we don't have enough people right now to maintain fully good support for all the teachers who would be using it. And we also need people with good ideas. Teachers who want to use this, they want to build a game, they want to be able to do something with the virtual world besides just move blocks around or build something that someone could explore, but they actually want to make an exercise. They want to take their curriculum, put it into a world, share it, and then let other people not only play with it, but maybe develop on top of it. We think that's important, and that's so. Get in contact with us. Look at our Kickstarter. Look at all the information we have on questatlantisreboot.org, and contact us, and we'll be happy to have any help we can get.
I'm not because this is really important what you're talking about. Nellie's bringing this up, some misunderstanding about Kickstarter. I think you've obviously you need money to do this, but could you tell us a little something about why it's $25,000? What happened? What do you do with that money? And believe me, I'm on your side. I'm sure that
Thank you.
You need it. But I'm just, this is going into a recording that people might listen to. So, what happens? What happens if you don't get the money? If you do get the money, this great work that you guys have been doing I've been seeing presentations on Quest Atlantis for years and kind of taken it for granted. It looks like a really great project for kids and for K to 12, for everybody really. It's got ideas that we can all use. It's a new way of learning. It's a way that develops critical thinking and all the skills that kids really need to go into the jobs that haven't been invented yet, that kind of thing. So explain, why it's so important that you get money to do this and get it through Kickstarter.
Okay, well, probably just we thought Kickstarter would give us a good opportunity to get the word out, and not only to the teachers who already use it, but to teachers maybe who just come in association with it, or maybe people who are involved in technology, and just see what the public interest is in a project like this. As far as the money, well, frankly, there's been 4 of us that have worked now for a year and a half volunteering, some of us full-time, to get this up and running and operational, and we've used some personal investment to do that. We feel that the reason we did that is because we have seen the reaction of students throughout the years to these educational virtual worlds. And more than that, we've seen some of these places, like Quest Atlantis, really come to life when there's people in there and when they're using them. And years later, you hear the experience, oh yeah, I had Quest Atlantis when I was in 7th grade, and that taught me all about just the experiences that people have. We know that these things work. So what we're planning to do with the money is pay for groceries, pay for servers, just keep things going the way they are, and start building with that success on attracting the teachers who have used it in the past. Maybe whether they had positive or possibly negative, maybe they didn't have enough support, maybe their technology in their school wasn't what it was needed to be. Work with them, make it accessible to as many people as we can. It's kind of been a labor of love up to this point, and now we feel like we're holding the door open now. We need some people to help us push this up the hill. We have, in our last conversation, Sasha and I were talking about what the future would hold for virtual worlds in classrooms, and he threw out the idea of interactive teachers and interactive students. So a place where a world would not just be explorable, but I'll shoot an example of this. One of the things we came up with. I'll just put it on the chat wing, or if I can find it. Yeah, okay. So this world is one of the concepts we're developing. It's called The Boy Who Dreamed a Windmill, and it's taken from the idea of the you might have read about the young man who in Malawi who was able to build a windmill out of parts. He couldn't afford to go to school, so he learned from a picture encyclopedia on how to build electric circuits, how to build a windmill, how to power buildings. It's just amazing when you think of what he did with so few tools. And in talking with Sasha, he was proposing the idea of a rubric and the ability for kids to collect things and then build something and have the rest of the students be able to judge whether it was successful or not successful. Have the teachers be able to judge it and participate together in this kind of a task. So we came up with this idea. In Quest Atlantis, we want to build an actual inventory system which will allow you to go through and find different parts, no matter what they are, that have different values assigned to them. And then if the exercise was to build a windmill, you'd be able to assemble those parts in your building area, and then the output of that machine that you just made would actually be measurable to the point where other people could give you your grade or answer if you were successful or not. But also, we've been experimenting with some of these, they're really kind of cool, these little robotic tools and some of the chips you can now buy at a very low price. And we've been able to put together some tools that respond to what takes place in the virtual world. So now you build your windmill, your dynamo in the world, and as you're successful in different stages, it will move or light up things on a physical machine that you have, almost like a Legos type thing on your desktop. So we could think of, one of the things we're thinking of is if you were on Mars, okay, and you had to control the rover to do something, to make signals or to look for specific parts that you needed, you would be able to write some code in your game, in the virtual world, and once you were completed, you would now be able to actually run your real world little droid that you had built. for measurable success. Someone could actually say, "Well, that works. What you did actually solved the problem." And we feel that the more kids are surrounded by what they're learning and immersed in it, the longer those experiences are retained, and that they can draw on it far into the future as they grow older. So those are some of the things we're working on. And that's a long answer for where the money goes, but it really goes to fuel this project. We think it's valuable. We know other people think it's valuable. We've already had financial support from other schools, but not quite enough to get it to the next level. And that's really what we're trying to do.
Rick, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things. I think if teachers were involved in Quest Atlantis, they may not also realize that the visual content and the capacity of Active Worlds is stellar now. It has moved on in many, many ways from the last version they may have engaged in Quest Atlantis. And I know that for a fact. But also I think it's more important here that if we took everyone, every teacher, every one of those, I think, we had 100,000 kids, but I think we had something like 25,000 teachers in 42 countries. If they each donated a small amount to have ownership of this new product, that's more important, isn't it? That we have a community developing where people feel they're part of the future of this program, which they often were in Quest Atlantis, because the designers were often taking on board what our teachers were saying, what new features they wanted, how they wanted to move forward with the program. Because someone has said $25,000 isn't a lot of money, but you're hoping to exceed that and to actually have people all over the world have some ownership of the program. Isn't that the way you want to look at it?
Yes, 100%. That's really our goal. Like I said, I am not an educator, and my company is not an educational company. We believe in education, but we need teachers to have ownership of this. That's exactly what our goal is.
So a couple of questions. One from the chat from Daniel, who asks, is there a business plan that shows how the fees might generate enough revenue for the future development? And also, Nellie's jumped in, raising her hand there, saying she could be able to help run a MOOC on games and virtual worlds that might give people more information about this if we could support that. So, I mean, there's a lot of goodwill, but perhaps Daniel's question is one people will want to understand. Is there a business plan, or are you hoping that the people who engage in the Kickstarter will help drive the business plan down the track?
Is there a business plan? Yes, there is a business plan, but of course, as you talk about business plans, it really kind of depends on if you have a product that people are interested in. So we have a plan that does not call for actual investment, but would drive itself through people paying to license the software, and whether that was large organizations that were doing this charitably or through grants, or if it was just people using the software and feeling that it was worth something to them. But yeah, we have an actual full business plan. We have only begun to work on a marketing plan to go along with that. I think actually the marketing plan is probably a lot more important at this point, because although there's a large group of teachers who know of Quest Atlantis or have heard of maybe Active Worlds or Virtual Worlds at some point, they really don't have a very clear idea of what they involve. The Virtual Worlds and virtual reality, obviously it's going to be huge over the next, the coming years. Who knows, maybe sooner than later. You see billions of dollars being pumped into this industry at this point. And at some point, it's important that it's being used for more than just silly little shoot 'em up games or whatever people plan to do with their virtual reality. It needs to be used for something that's for the good of kids, good of the whole world. being able to train people in how to do real things and solve real problems, because the problems aren't getting any smaller. And that's really that's core. That's our mission, is to make a very useful piece of software that can be used by anyone and enable them to train themselves or to train others. So yeah, if someone's interested in the business plan, we can shoot them out. We don't really have any kind of prospectus written out at this point, but it's a pretty detailed plan.
Another question: suppose, let's see, I'm an educator. I like this idea. How do I get into it? What would draw me into Quest Atlantis? How would I decide or be enabled to become part of the program?
Okay.
And suppose consider I might be thinking about Minecraft, which is a little complicated. You have to know a lot about Minecraft in order to really use it. But or just hand it over to the students. So anyway, but go ahead and with all the things I'm considering as an educator, I want to convince my school, hey, look, Quest Atlantis, this is really cool. How would I sell that to my higher ups?
Okay, well, thank you for asking that. I think what would sell it is actually the range of what it does. It's not just virtual reality, but there's an entire toolkit that lies to the side of it and underlays the whole program, so that once you've contacted us and we have set you up with a classroom and licensed you for your students, you now have complete access to a dashboard that allows you to track how the kids are using it, how they are responding to the various quizzes, and it's the kind of learning that you can actually, it's smart enough, the platform is smart enough to tell you if someone is actually getting the information, or if they are not quite, they're not quite there and they need some additional classroom time or discussion to work through this. So you would contact us, we would set you up, and then we would happily walk you through how to use this in your classroom setting. And it's once you've started using it, it's pretty straightforward. I came into it not as a teacher, but kind of on an administration level with very little experience. It only took me a couple days before I was scripting out actual games to use. So there's a structure, and maybe Ellen, maybe you have some comments on that. I think you'd probably be much better than me to address this.
Oh yes, well, I like that you are emphasizing, the new feature, the authoring feature, is much easier to just walk into and start using, and that is really good. And I also think, in terms of distinguishing from Minecraft, I think the fact that, Rick, you were getting to the structure, the fact that there is a structure that sort of provides almost a world within a world, that provides some meaning for actions in the space, is very different from Minecraft, and both of those things have their strengths. But the fact that Minecraft has no text, either input or output, students aren't really reading very much, they're not writing very much, and there isn't meaning, there's not a culture there, there isn't a system by which students can make choices that feel consequential, except whether they choose to light the dynamite that blows up their friend's house. There are huge strengths to what Minecraft is, but there are also huge pedagogical affordances to what Quest Atlantis is. So the fact that there is a context in Quest Atlantis allows so much more to happen in class discussion and in collaborative work and in writing. The fact that there's a lot of reading means that there's a lot of modeled dialogue, there's a lot of modeled academic discourse that then students are eased into participating in themselves. And they do this through writing, they do it through interacting with game characters, they do it through interacting with each other as they're all figuring out how to navigate the space. And all of that is a completely different literacy experience than Minecraft. So I think that there's a lot that would grab a teacher and lead them to make that choice, depending on the kind of experience that they're interested in providing for the students.
And another question, too. Where is the community? If I want to become involved in a community of educators around Quest Atlantis, what's my best option?
Okay, so for now, so originally there was a Quest Atlantis blog, and there was Bron, and Bron worked with our project manager to host teachers in bi-weekly discussions, and then the team would go and do trainings. And then Bron would be responsible for buoy teachers in the rest of the world, the non-US, so that there would always be somebody reasonably local who could travel to train a new group of teachers. And so that was all possible because of the funding that we had at the time. But as that funding has dwindled, the power of things like MOOCs and of all of these tools for digital presence and hosting online courses that are also live has grown. So in our initial release, we would expect to, if we have enough of a subscriber base to sustain the platform, that should be a size that we can also work with directly through contact online. And I'm very interested in the MOOC idea because I think that would be enormously beneficial to this process. Moving forward after that, we'll have to see where we can go because the online trainings do scale very well, and the more that we can put in the form of self-guided tutorials, the more that's going to scale well, I think. So that's what we're looking at for now, but initially, while we develop that, it's still going to be very face-to-face through online mediation.
Okay. We're coming up to the top of the hour, and I think, by the way, Bron is one of your great strengths because she has certainly been informing people at conference after conference about this project, and she's also a venerable researcher in this area. Do you have any thing to add, Bron, along those lines? I suppose you have done research. Well, I know you have on. It's a data mine.
Yeah,
no?
we have. There's lots of data has been gathered in Quest Atlantis over the years. We know a lot about the kinds of teachers that take up these programs and why, and that's been quite fascinating. For me, it's the global reach of the program has been part of the fascination for a lot of teachers, for their kids to be in the world, in a virtual world with kids from all over the world, in a safe space with trusted adults, has been, a really big driving force for that. I'm excited about the future for Quest Atlantis. I don't think it needs to think about competing with Minecraft because this program will offer teachers some prepackaged curriculum, which Minecraft itself needs a lot of investment to bring a curriculum into play. And yet it still offers the advantage of having the possibility for kids doing design work. I think that's rather interesting. It may be the program people want to go to after they've been in Minecraft, or the program they've used to leverage Minecraft better. I don't know. I think there's room for us all to be playing in different spaces and leveraging what we learn from each one, because kids will start to demand better quality learning spaces the more of these spaces that they have access to. So I think it's kind of exciting, and I want to encourage every teacher and anyone watching this video who used Minecraft, used Quest Atlantis, sorry, while it was offered free to them in their classrooms, to think about paying it forward or paying it up by investing in the Kickstarter. And you had all that massive support while the grant funding was there for free. And if you loved it, and I know there are thousands of teachers who did, then maybe it's time to ask yourself or your school to invest in the Kickstarter and help bring that vision into play.
And I would like to I'd like to thank all the teachers who have used it in the past, because really the project that we're working on right now, rebooting it, the first step was just getting everything back. And when we look at the content that's already been developed and the things that have already been built, they weren't built by me. You've done a lot of work throughout the years, and the continued support of people like Bron. We really, really appreciate that, and that's one of the things that's keeping us going.
Yeah, I think, as I've said, I kind of assumed that Quest Atlantis was just going to continue on because it was such a beautiful project, and it really, I thought when Bron started posting about the Kickstarter and how to revive it really passionately on Facebook and other places, I thought, well, wow, we've got to get this onto Learning Together and get it out there and talk about it. And so, it is something that people have to reflect that these things really aren't, they have to be supported. And, I certainly wish you success there, and will make my own contribution. So,
thank you.
Yeah, I hope others will do as well.
Thank you.
It's happening in small increments, isn't it?
Yeah.
Every little bit helps.
It does. Every little bit helps, and every little bit, I think even more than money, I think just the idea of teachers who feel that it is a valuable tool, not just something nostalgic, but something that is still valuable and that they can contribute to, that's what's really going to keep Quest Atlantis alive. That's why it's important.
And a big thank you to Vance and the Learning Together project for giving us this time to share the good news about Quest Atlantis.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vance.
Okay, well, we've just entered tomorrow here at Learning Together in UAE, and I've got to get up early, so and thank you, Bron, for getting up early. She's actually, as I said, up at the same hour that I need to be up tomorrow morning to do this. So but this is our passion. This is what we believe in. So that's why we're here. And anyway, thank you all for joining us. We've been with Bron Stuckey and Rick Knoll, who is actually, I mentioned him earlier, he's a hero of mine because he actually is a developer of Active Worlds, which I used to play back in the days. We were talking about the Palace and Powwow and ICQ and all the, this era. Active Worlds was really the big thing. And Ellen Jameson, who's involved in the Reboot Quest Atlantis project, and Bron, of course, for contributing so much of her research efforts and her imprimatur, I suppose. Anyway. Well, anyway, thank you, everyone. Thanks for Daniel, who's come. Daniel, by the way, is involved in doing much the same thing, raising funds for inner city kids in Chicago. And Nellie Deutsch, who is just everywhere with, and she said she was inspired by what she's heard tonight. And
thanks.
Maybe you can get some connections and use her to help leverage what you're trying to do. It all works together.
Yes.
So. Yeah, thank you very much. This is now it's the 31st of August already here, and this is Learning Together. I'm Vance Stevens from Align UAE, signing off, and thanks everybody for coming out.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Goodbye, Bron. Goodbye, Ellen.
Bye.
Bye, Vance.
Bye-bye.
See you all. Thank you again.